Hi girls, my name is Julia J. Gibbs. I'm really excited to talk to y'all with the American Heritage Girls, right? I heard about this group years ago. Too bad I was too old to join, but very impressed that y'all are doing this. Love the program and I love what y'all are involved with and that it has a Christ-centered focus. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do. I write fiction novels and I also write Bible studies and I travel around and I talk about them and then I teach them in my house or different places that I go. But I'm going to talk to you today a little bit more about the fiction writing that I do. So I have written a series called The Oaks Remain. This is the first book. And this is the second book called The Horizon Between. You can see they're a little bit thicker books. And then the third one that is about to, well, I say about to come out, I need to finish it. I'm really close, is called The Final Beginning. So I started writing these books around 2012, I guess. I think that was right. My youngest son is adopted from Congo and he came home and he was really little and we needed time at home. And the Lord just opened up this opportunity for me to slow down and start to write. I honestly wanted to write for years. I wrote for newspapers or magazines and like the high school newspapers or newspapers when we lived in Europe and different things like that. But I knew I wanted to write a story. God kept giving me this idea of how to write a story. And I would say that I'm somebody that's always been a storyteller. And I grew up with a family who loves to sit around the fire at night and tell stories. That's a huge part of our family is our oral tradition. And so I've always been a storyteller and I knew I wanted to write this book. And I have to be honest, the way I learned to write in school was a little bit detrimental to me, not because it was a bad way to write, but because it wasn't the way my brain worked, right? Anyone can say, hey, my brain works a little bit differently maybe. So here's what I mean. In school, they teach you to write an outline and then start on page 1. And usually it's in the beginning, right? Bereshit, right? So in the beginning, something happened and then you're supposed to work in a linear fashion. Well, I would always start books like that and I would never finish them. So I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that, but I would get tired of trying to figure out all the details and how we were going to get there. And so I would just kind of quit. So one day I felt like the Lord freed me up to think about how he created my mind to work. And I realized I want to write scenes. So in my mind, I could see this huge scene happening like it was a movie. And I would play out I could hear everyone talking and what they were doing. And I realized I'm going to write that scene. And then when the next scene comes to me, even if it doesn't fit yet, even if I have no idea how it goes together, I'm going to write scene after scene after scene. And so that's how I wrote this first book, The Oaks Remain, was a lot of scenes that I wanted to happen, but I kind of had to sit back and look at the whole thing and go, okay, so I have all of this. How do I connect it now? So I realized that I don't write in linear fashion. I write more, I don't know if you would say circular or you might say schizophrenic, right? Just all over the place, putting it together at the end. And so I didn't know, you haven't probably read the first book, so I'm not going to tell you, but there's a hook at the end. And as an author, I'm going to tell you something. I wrote the end of that book. And when I wrote it, I go, oh, I did not see it coming. I didn't know that about the main character. And so it was really a fun experience for me too, because I felt like the Lord created everything in 7 days. And then as someone who is, I would say, an artist, okay, because when you write, it's a form of art. you are taking what he's already created, right? And you're trying to figure out how it goes together. And it's like building with Play-Doh, right? I didn't create anything that I wrote in this story because I based it on the allegory of Scripture, from the trees in Genesis to the trees in Revelation. And then the Lord allowed me, from what he's already written, what he's already created, I got to write a fictional storyline that ran along an allegorical line to his truth. So it's really a neat thing that you get to do. One of my favorite authors is Madeleine L'engle, and she wrote a series that you might know called A Wrinkle in Time. Let's not talk about the movie. It was not good. But her books are wonderful. But in an adult book that she writes called Walking on Water, it's reflections of art and Christianity. She says that as an artist, we are looking at the chaos of the world and then making order out of it. And so God created order, and he created everything. And when you're an artist, whether you're drawing or you're singing or you're writing or you're just thinking outside the box, you're looking at everything that feels chaotic to you. And then you're trying, as God taught you to do, because you are made in the image of Christ, you are coming in and creating order. You're creating a story that can be read and interpreted and understood. So that's kind of the inspiration about how I started this series. I wrote a book starting with using my own family, because the old saying is write what you know. So there is a Verily Harper, and she has an older sister named Adair, and she has a younger sister named Osley. And so I wrote this story based on my family because I am a middle daughter. My older sister is Brooke, and my little sister is Stephanie. And at the beginning of this series, it's based in South Alabama. They go to Atlanta. It's 25 years in the future. I used what I know about family life, but and I used what I knew about my sisters. But as the story evolved, they became their own people. So it might have started with their personality types. It's not actually them by the time the flesh and blood is put on the characters. To give you an example of the allegory in the story, the three sisters represent three sides of the church. The oldest sister represents legalism inside the church, the need to protect through the law and through rules. And the younger sister represents social justice, the need to have mercy outweigh justice. And when we are not to be the ones that decides mercy and justice, it is God alone, and he is both, and you can't have one without the other. So she represents social justice and the imbalance that comes through that side of the church. And then there's Verily Harper, the middle sister, who at the beginning was kind of me with my personality, but honestly, she became her own, I don't know if you want to say life, right, or person, because she is fiction, but she represents the church that's trying to get through this. Okay, legalism is on this side, social justice is on this side. What is God calling me to be? You will notice in my book, God is never mentioned. He is represented in the one tree. And so you'll see the allegory running through there. In the book, it sounds honestly weird when I say it out loud. It's all about bloodlines, that 95% of the world are called Frigascore. And they have a bloodline from the beginning of time that has death in their veins. And so they're like decrepit looking, and their skin falls apart, and they die super young, and they have cataracts over their eyes. One of their best five senses is actually smell, because they're almost like feral in a way. And so you have the Frigascore are majority of the world. A best way would be to put it is, what if The Walking Dead was the majority, right? And not like Walking Dead like we think of now, how The Walking Dead has been done, but more like, what if it was everyday life, functioning in everyday life, all right? Because those people have death in their veins and it's decaying them. This is representative of sin, and that all of us are born into sin, and that all of us need a savior. But then there is the simulacrum. The word is a Latin word that comes from the word to mean an image bearer. Let me give you an example before you're like, what? Mickey Mouse is a simulacrum of a real mouse. Okay, he's not the real mouse. He's a prototype or a simulacrum of a real mouse. Plato loved to discuss the concept of simulacrum. And it was a very popular conversation for those philosophers. So we, as believers, are image bearers of Christ. We are not Christ, but we are a simulacrum of him. We are made in his image, right? So we would be Mickey Mouse for the real mouse, kind of, right? But as the story goes on, you kind of figure out that there's this third group that also exist in the world. And then what you think the simulacrum are, by book 2, you start realizing, wait a minute, that's a different group of people. And so there is this hidden group that lives within the Frigus core, and they're called Boged, and the word means traitor in Hebrew. Because while writing books, I use Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Akkadian, okay, and English, of course. But I mix all of these biblical languages in so that we can see the original words. And then when you might see them later in scripture, you're like, oh, I remember a word picture from that. So the last group, the Boged, are living as though they're Frigus core. They believe they're Frigus core. But when a certain thing happens, they're awakened and they come to life. So that's kind of the storyline. There's a great time traveler in there, the love interest of the story, and lots goes on. It's so busy. But something that's cool about the new books that came out is the artwork. So I have a great friend. I pulled this off my wall. I have a bunch of these framed. But this is showing the land that they go into, which is in another dimension, where the simulacrum go into the Oaks of Mamre, which if you like think Oaks of Mamre sounds familiar, that is where God met Abraham in the real Bible, okay, at the Oaks of Mamre, at the tent door, when God first visited with Abraham and said, you're going to have a child, right? So I use all biblical places and names, but this is the picture of the final council meeting at the end of the book. And so those pictures are interlaced through the story. And to kind of help you think through it and see what it looks like. It's fun. If you don't realize it, I am a lover of Tolkien and I'm a lover of C.S. Lewis. And they did that old school like charcoal etching artwork, and I wanted to emulate that. I loved that, where it wasn't so vibrant and colorful that you didn't get to use your imagination, but it was enough to help your imagination. So that was the goal on using the charcoal look in the art. So writing a book takes me about 2 years. The first year, I literally just do what I was talking about, write the scenes out. The second year spends a lot of time connecting what I would say, I've got a skeleton, and now I need to put the sinews, the connections. How do these people get there? I got to make sure everything is a continual line. There's no discrepancy in storyline or in characters. Because you see, you as a reader get to know the character. And if the character does something that you're like, wait a minute, that's so outside your scope, then it pulls you out of the story because you're stopping and going, that's not like that person at all, right? Much like can happen in everyday life. So to help with that, you go to editors. After you're done with the story, you're just beginning. The editors come in, and I have about 4 or 5 different editors. I have grammatical editors that's just looking at the comma and the period and the capitalization and did you use this word in the right place? Right? That often is not my strong point. So if any of you are not wonderful at grammar out there, there's hope for you, okay? And then you have editors called developmental editors. And they're looking at the development of the story. And then you have character editors that are going to help with, are your characters staying consistent? All of them are going to find problems. All of them are going to tell you, this is messed up. You need to go back and rework it. And you can grieve it a little bit. I usually sit for 2 days thinking, it's not messed up. It's great. I don't know what they're thinking. They're crazy. They didn't read it right. And then by the 3rd day, I'm like, oh, I need to go fix all of this, right? So when you get papers turned back in, work through it, because it doesn't mean your work isn't great. It means it's not great yet. All right. And that you've got to put in the time and the effort to produce what you want it to be. And I've never produced something on the first try. that was gold ever. It really does take the pruning away, just constant pruning away at it to find the gold within. So you have to really be willing to work hard to write. And then I go into editing. So after editing, I go into publishing. I work with people who do my covers. If that's your thing and you like to design, that's an entire world, is that you can do covers for books. And you can do layouts for the inside. That's part of it. So there's a lot of different things that can go into the writing process. But this is what I would mainly tell you. I sign almost everyone on the inside of the book. I sign this way because I feel so deeply about it. Everyone has a story, and it's yours to tell. That's why the Lord gave you a voice. So if you feel like you want to write something down, just sit with the Lord, ask him what's your story, and begin to write the things that he's writing in you. It is a wonderful tool that God allowed us to have to work through emotion and work through situations and to tell people the great and awesome story of what Christ has done in our lives. So I would just encourage you that if you're thinking about writing, just go and start writing. Grab a journal and write day by day by day, because that is where you're going to get something that's really worth its weight in gold, is in the effort of working really hard at something and not quitting, because God is working really hard on you and he's not quitting either. And so I believe that we're called to match his work ethic as best as we can as a simulacrum who is not God, but is made in the image of God. So thanks for listening to me. If you ever want to, I have a YouTube channel at Julia J. Gibbs, and I teach through there and talk about different things like writing, and would love to connect with y'all. And I just pray that whatever the Lord has given you to do, that you do it 100% for the Father and for his glory. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.